Everyone, welcome back to Coaching the Bible. This is episode 239, season 5, episode 26. Our topic of the week is going to be the concept of being a better diagnostician. You are a leader. You are in the business of leadership. You are doing great things in that space. And yet, perhaps this is an area where you can improve. I hope you had a great week. This week in Israel is up and down. When you have the Memorial Day and then you have the Independence Day right after, it's an up and down experience emotionally. It's a real roller coaster. And certainly in the last 2 years, you see it more acutely and more directly and more intensely around you, in and around you every single day. I attended a program this week on Tuesday evening, for Memorial Day here. Incredibly emotional and moving and powerful experience being around what's called the lone soldier community. It's people who have come here to live here in Israel and have done so through the prism of joining the IDF, and the numbers of losses and tragedies that have happened to that group just since the war started, 43, is hard to grasp. And sitting in the room with their family and their friends and their colleagues, and their commanders, and the organizations that supported them and that brought them here and helped them and supported them while they were here was incredibly moving. And then to have that go right into Yom HaAtzmaut, what's the Hebrew term for Independence Day here, that transition is unbelievable. But it was festive. We tried to make it festive. We tried to celebrate because we, A, don't have any place else to go, and B, we do appreciate what it is and what we do have here in the state of Israel, being here, living here, raising a family here, succeeding here, building here. So that was this week here. I want to dive into this subject. I think it's a super important and super powerful thing to think about, is the idea here as a leader, how you get better at diagnosis, the discipline of diagnosis. So our topic, the title, Before You Fix It, See It, on the discipline of diagnosis. In our series called The Leader Within, that's where we are. We're exploring all those invisible things that define great leadership: inner habits, emotional maturity, self-awareness, that quietly but powerfully shape every external decision. Meaning that nothing happens on the outside. None of the actions that happen, that you see, that others see, happen in a vacuum. They're built and they are raised on top of so many things that are going on inside the person. And so this week's particular thing focuses in on the idea of the high priest, or the priest, as a diagnostician. I know it seems like a weird thing to think about and a weird term to use as we're talking about a high priest or a priest, a religious figure, to be a diagnostician, but it is in fact the case here with respect to the priest in the space of the biblical concept of leprosy. Again, leprosy, not the physical malady leprosy, but a spiritual malady, that's leprosy, that appears in this week's portion in great detail and great length, and has this interesting and perhaps odd role for the priest, because again, it looks like a physical malady, but it's not. And then he has this role, and his role is simply, in a nutshell, to declare what is seen on the person's body or on their clothing or in their home as pure or impure. He's not a judge in the sense that he's judging the person, and he can't heal it, and he doesn't cure it. He simply sees it. And that idea of seeing it, that is the space of being a really powerful and really good diagnostician. So he doesn't heal, he doesn't cure, he sees. And so what we're going to explore is the ideas that you can't fix what you haven't really seen. So to just sort of experience it in the ether, or to close your eyes and to see an experience, or to even more powerfully, more palpably see it in a simulator situation, is not the same as actually having seen it and be able to really work on the problem to find the solution until you've actually seen it with your own eyes, diagnosed it with your own eyes. And so in our modern world, in the world in which we live, where leaders are trained to act and to respond and to perform, we sometimes lose the art of slow, deliberate, humble diagnosis. So before we jump into solving problems as a leader in a business, in a company, on a team, in an organization, in a classroom, in a family, in a community, all those spaces that we talk about all the time, you need to learn to see them more clearly. And that takes more discipline than most of us have, or most of us are willing to admit that we need. So let's dive in to that space. Here's a scenario. Nonprofit leader, business leader, notices declining energy on their team. So in the space of the nonprofit, where I mostly live, see this sometimes with leaders, they're experiencing that donors are less responsive. The weekly check-in meetings are feeling a lot more hollow. And so if you're an impulsive, reactive leader, your initial instinct, fire someone, restructure something, fix it, fix it, fix it. But is that in fact leadership? Is that in fact the right reaction? What if the real problem isn't what you think it is? Do you really know what's actually going on? Or are you manifesting simply what you fear might be going on, but isn't actually happening at all? And this is a diagnostic trap where your ego or your innate or inherent fears, your lived experience, the anxiety, tensions, and pressures of leading cause us or lead us or push us or direct us to act before we actually understand. And so let's understand first the idea of the priest as a diagnostician, appreciating the idea that we have to see it before we can fix it. We've talked in the past about the skill of listening. That's certainly a powerful skill, really important for leadership. And here we're talking about seeing. And so the Bible tells us in chapter 13 that the person who has this blemish, who has this thing, who has this, I don't know what you want to call it, on their skin, is to bring it to, in the case of the Bible itself, to Aaron the high priest or to one of his sons. And the priest's job is to examine the affliction. That's his job. The priest cannot treat it. The priest cannot fix it. His job is simply to declare it pure or impure, or to put the person in what you might call limbo status, where they have to be alone by themselves for a period of time, and they reassess it a week later. So the role on some level is about restraint, not reaction. Because maybe the first time they see that kind of blemish or affliction on someone's skin, someone's head, someone's body, someone's clothing, someone's home, they might have a rash and wild a reaction. The person's family might have that kind of a wild reaction. But it's the responsibility and what's incumbent upon the priest is about restraint and not reaction. It's about protecting the dignity of the individual who's going through this and the integrity of the community who's having this happen in their space. And so the priest must see with full clarity. There's an idea that comes out of midrashic literature based on the terminology in one of the verses that he has to use, quote unquote, all of his sight, is that the priest cannot have any visual weakness. In the technical space, it means he can't be blinded in one eye, he can't have limited sight. He has to be able to fully see what is being shown to them. If we want to extrapolate from that, it means they can have no visual weakness, they can have no bias, and they cannot rush. He cannot partially see, he cannot rely on any pattern matching or some old instinct, no gut reaction. He must be fully present to this particular moment, to this particular case, to this particular person. And whereas is the case with an individual today, we might rush to make a decision, we might rush to diagnose the problem, we might rush to say who's to blame, we might rush to find the solution. Leadership that the Bible is teaching us here, that the leader has to develop, the inner leader, the leader within, is not about power, but it's about their perception. And so leadership starts with sight and not with action. That's deeper. Because you could go to a priest and say, look, he has 40 years of experience diagnosing these things. He'll know right off the bat whether this is or this isn't leprosy. That might be true. But we can't apply that. The person has to fully see what's going on, and we'll talk more about that in just a second. Just take a step back for a minute to appreciate the value and impact of good diagnostic abilities as a leader. There's an article written in Harvard Business Review. I think it was 2019, by Ron Ashkenaz and Brooke Manville called Diagnose Problems Before You Solve Them, which emphasizes that one of the most underdeveloped leadership skills is diagnostic thinking. They argue that too often leaders jump into action based on assumptions or early indicators, only to really solve the wrong problem or to solve it entirely wrong. So here's what they write. Too many managers treat the symptoms rather than the disease. Smart diagnosis means slowing down long enough to ask the right questions and to understand what's really going on. So this really validates our core idea here. The priest's model of diagnosis is not just about fulfilling the ritual or getting it done. It reflects a very timeless, critical leadership skill. Leaders who learn to see clearly before they act aren't passive. They're actually trying to sue for precision. And so it is the case that we seek precise diagnoses across different fields of work. We don't want a doctor who's going to be imprecise. We don't want a doctor who's going to be rash. We don't want a doctor who simply relies on gut to make decisions. A good doctor doesn't just treat the symptoms. They're always looking for the underlying cause. So they take an extended patient history. They'll observe the person. They'll ask a lot of questions. Maybe they'll test something. They'll rule some things out to get closer to clarity. They might wait a little bit longer even to get even more clarity before naming any sort of diagnosis. Sure, we've all heard cases where somebody's been misdiagnosed. The number, God forbid, the number of patients, people who die on an annual basis or suffer through procedures or medicines or all kinds of, whatever you want to call it, plans that are purely based on misdiagnosis is very high. I think I saw a statistic of something like 15 to 20% of adverse hospital events are due to misdiagnosis. And so diagnosis is a key factor in medicine. In psychology, it's not different. A trained therapist won't label a client too quickly. And one that does label too quickly is probably a therapist you don't want to see. They are very much taught, and this I read in a different article, to fight what you might call premature closure, the tendency to stop investigating too early. We'll hope that they'll have something what you call diagnostic humility. Love that term. Knowing that people are layered and what you might first see is rarely, almost never the entire story. To go a step further, to go to root causes, to see what's at the base of what's actually happening, right? To do the surgery on the knee and not just quote unquote around the knee, but around, not just around the brain, but actually in the brain, to really appreciate what's going on with the person before diagnosing any sort of specific malady or problem or issue. I know this certainly with coaching. We're not looking just to make solutions. We're looking for patterns in coaching. We're looking for what's not being said. We're looking at assumptions. And so we're looking for more, to see more, to understand more, to go deeper before being able to do more. That's the power of good diagnosis. That's the impact, potentially, of good diagnosis. But I want to go back to the biblical section for just a minute, because it goes even further. One of the things that is required on the priest is the priest has to go to the person who is afflicted. So when the person is afflicted and then let's say they're diagnosed as impure, they have to leave the camp. They have to set up shop all by themselves for an extended period of time. And then it is the case that the priest has to cross all the camps to go out to that space. He has to go see the person. He has to be present in front of the person. They can't mail it in. They can't do it via email. They can't do it via Zoom. I don't think they could do it via Zoom. They have to be all the way there with the person. And so there's a commentary known as the Meshech Chachma who adds on that idea that the Kohen, the priest, has to see both the affliction and the person to appreciate the person, and let's widen that out to appreciate the person's circumstances. We learn I know it's in the Talmud, I think it's also Midrashic literature as well, that if a person appreciates the sense, let's say as an example, that the person who's afflicted is set to be married, then we delay the diagnosis so as not to ruin the impending moment of happiness. Context is important. Compassion is important. Humanity is important. We're not just looking for flaws. We're not just looking to pinpoint, oh, this is your malady. Oh, this is your problem. Oh, this is where you're wrong. Oh, this is where you're sick. Oh, this is where you're ill. Being here, there's a person here. And so you have to see the totality of the person. You have to go out to the person. You have to be in their space. And to add on a little bit further, I saw written in the name of Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi, I think is a super commentary on, famous commentary of Rashi, to appreciate this person is completely and totally alone. And as a leader, the priest has to model leadership that shows up in the spaces where other people may not want to go or may not be able to go. The priest, who is this pure person, has to go out to the space of the impure person to help them, to perhaps declare them pure again, to take them through the process of purification. And so it's deeper than simply just, intellectual diagnosis. See the person, see their context, see their circumstance, see the situation, see what's going on at a much deeper level. And in that space, then you have the opportunity, perhaps, to build better diagnostic models. And so how do we do this as a leader? So what's really crucial, right at the top, is this. Slowing down your judgment is how you speed up your impact. I'm going to say that one again. Slowing down your judgment is how you speed up your impact. It reminds me of an episode of JJ the Jet Plane. My kids used to watch it many, many years ago. Can't believe I'm mentioning this, but okay. Wherein there were too many planes flying in at the same time. And so the first thought initially was to speed it up, speed it up, speed it up. And they said, no, the actual solution is to slow down and appreciate where the bottlenecks are, because slowing down actually helps you to speed up. I think there's a Navy SEALs comment that's similar to that idea as well. And so here, very importantly, to become a better leader, you have to slow down your judgment. And here are 5 tools to train on. Number 1, observation over action. Wait, watch, and resist the urge to decide immediately. Write down your first impressions. Something happened. Yeah, sometimes you need to act because you have to separate individuals. Let's say, remember years ago when I taught in high school, a fight broke out in the hallway between 2 students. Principal came in. His first thing was to separate the students, to end the conflict, and then figure out what actually happened later on. So the first thing here, similarly, is observe before acting. Give yourself the time to observe what took place, to contemplate what happens. Yes, sometimes there's an emergency situation, understood. But now that you've written down what you thought, come back to it later, revisit it, review it, analyze it, reconsider. Number 2 is to invoke a heavy dose of curiosity. Ask yourselves the following 3 questions. What else might be true here? What's not being said? Am I seeing the totality, the entirety, the whole system, or just the symptom? So is this the system or the symptom? Those are very close, but they're not the same thing. By invoking a heavy level of curiosity here over your surety and certainty, you get to a better ultimate diagnosis, and then you get to a solution faster. Number 3, just like the priest, you're not the hero here. You're not the fixer. So detachment from your personal ego, appreciating that your role first and foremost is a clarifier before a solver, you get to better results. You're building greater, deeper levels of trust, respect, accountability, responsibility by slowing down and not simply by swooping in and saving the day. Number 4 is what we'll call compassionate contextualization. Try to say that 3 times fast. You want to look at the totality and the whole person. Ask about that person. What's going on around them? What season of life are they in? Something going on. Is something happening? Something that I'm not paying attention to? Something that I missed? Maybe if you have a close confidant around you that knows that person as well, you can ask a couple of curious questions. Be compassionate along with your curiosity and hold off labeling when someone might be in transition, might be in stress, or might be, as we talked about last week, in a space of grief. And then the last thing here is to hold still, disciplined stillness. Holding still and holding pat and giving the space to hear and to listen, you're creating the opportunity for clarity to emerge. So it's not that you're passive, but you're opening up space. You're holding space for the clarity to emerge by itself. It's almost something like we talked about previously, strategic patience or strategic inactivity before you then do act. All these things really help the leader become infinitely better at leading. That's the work, that's the inner work. That's the leader from within that have to practice those skills. If you're an impetuous person, or you are a type of person who likes to solve, who even further perhaps likes to be the hero, then diagnostic discipline is very hard for you. But it's very powerful for you to develop as a skill because it makes you a better leader, so that when you are in a position to solve, you're solving better. You're solving at a greater level. You're having greater impact when you're solving in that way. So let's come back to our original scenario where we talked about something slowing down, something not happening at this organization. The leader notices declining energy on the staff. They notice the donors are less responsive. They notice that the weekly check-ins seem a little bit empty and hollow. So what's the right move? Depends on what you're seeing. But it's only true if you're willing to slow down enough to really see it. What if you did pause? What if you brought full eyesight, complete view, like the priest? What if you look not just at the numbers, but you were more compassionate or more empathetic and looked at the people? What might you diagnose then? And then, once you've diagnosed it, once you know, you're much of the way there. What kind of action emerges once you're wiser, smarter, more knowledgeable, more human, more compassionate, more empathetic, more completely aware of the context that solves for greater X? Your plan will be better. Your actions will be crisper. The speed with which you get to the solution will be palpable, noticeable, and obvious. And that's the power of greater diagnostic ability and that skill set, which is very much, in many cases, underdeveloped, but in also many cases underappreciated and undervalued for great leadership. As I said before, and I'll say it again, you can't fix what you haven't really seen. Let that be your mantra here. In times of pressure, it's tempting to act fast, but your greatest strength might be your ability to hold back, to hold fast until what you're seeing is actually full, is actually clear, and is actually true. To end it off, as we always do, with a quote, the first responsibility of a leader is to define reality. That is from Max de Pree. The first responsibility of a leader is to define reality. So, leader, think about this, work through it, appreciate what it is to be a greater diagnostic leader, to have the ability to stop, slow down, breathe, think, look, ask, become curious, compassionate, contextual, empathetic, all those spaces to hold the strategy back, to hold the reaction back, to hold the answers back until you have the full picture, just like the priest, of what's actually going on. Then you become an infinitely better leader because you're an infinitely better diagnostician. That is Coaching the Bible for this week. I hope you have a wonderful, glorious, and incredibly beautiful weekend. Blessing you for all that's good in the world. See you next week.